you know the saying, they don't make them like they used to. We're in a world where when something breaks down, from the toaster to the vacuum cleaner, well, we throw it away.
And turns out, for good reason.
It's too expensive or just impossible to get electronics and appliances fixed.
So, the Green Party wants to introduce a new bill to extend the lifespan of goods, reduce waste and empower consumers.
The right to repair bill is exactly that. The right for us to repair our goods.
But not everyone is convinced.
I want to just start by saying that National won't be supporting this bill.
Kia ora, I'm Amanda Gillies, and today on The Detail, the right to repair bill. What is it? What does it mean for Kiwis, and what are the pros and the cons? Well, it was drafted by Green Party co-leader Marama Davidson and was pulled from the biscuit tin last year. It passed its first reading in Parliament last month.
In Aotearoa, we're all really proud of being able to fix our stuff. We actually highlight that as a primary part of the culture of us. We fix stuff. We like to get under the hood. We like to work out what has gone wrong. The right to repair bill will support us to be able to fix our stuff when things go wrong, when they break.
National's Dan Bidwell was quick to reply in the House.
There is a real challenge here around right to repair. Okay, so Madam Speaker, it doesn't suit low-priced goods, but even high-priced goods. And the research from Harvard Business Review backs this up. In their models, they calculate that actually prices increase as a result for particular high-priced items because of the right to repair. So it becomes a lose-lose-lose situation, Madam Speaker, for consumers, producers, and in the environment.
So we've got the Green Party on one side who has put forward the bill saying it's long overdue and fantastic, and then National saying not quite, we're not supporting it. Who are you with?
I'd have to say at the moment we would be with National.
That's Alex Varanyak-Wheeler, CEO of Master Electricians, her reasoning and her warning in a moment. But first, some context for the bill, why the Green Party wants it introduced.
Think back to the last time you took a household appliance to get repaired. I suspect the answer was last century or maybe even never.
I'm definitely in the never group, like so many others, and this is the fallout.
We create electronic waste at one of the fastest rates in the world.
97,000 tonnes of electronics are biffed each year, the equivalent of filling both Eden Park and the Sky Tower with 4 sliced toasters, and equal to 20 kilos for every person a year.
But we are the only one of the 38 OECD countries without an e-waste regulation. Marama Davidson says the new bill will improve our wastage.
It will require manufacturers to provide information and spare parts and access to be able to fix our own stuff. So it's going to send less waste to landfill.
Here's an example. Right now, you break the lever on your toaster, you can't find a replacement part, so you biff it and get a new toaster. Under the proposed new law, the manufacturer or importer will be required to ensure the part is available here in New Zealand, or there is somewhere where you can get it repaired. Consumer New Zealand says this is great news. Here's spokesperson Abby Darman speaking to journalists.
We've seen really positive effects of legislation in the UK in 2021.
Ministers here in the UK are introducing tougher rules to make appliances like fridges, washing machines and TVs cheaper to run and last longer. From this summer, manufacturers will be legally obliged to make spare parts available to consumers with the aim of extending the lifespan of their products. The move is designed to reduce electrical waste and cut carbon emissions from making new goods.
And there's probably going to be pushback from manufacturers because a movement like this is seriously disrupting the status quo. But this is something we really can't afford not to do.
So why can't we afford not to? I asked Abby.
So if we look at what's actually happening overseas, we've got France, which has sort of been pioneering the right to repair movement. And the UK has this great system where some categories of products, like let's say whiteware or whatever, people can go onto a website and there's sort of like step-by-step diagnostic. This is how you can fix it. These are repair people in your area. So it's about all these products that are out there in the world have a process for people to be able to follow to get their stuff fixed. If New Zealand doesn't sort of catch up here, then in time we do run the risk of becoming a dumping ground for products that are made really cheap or for products that don't have spare parts available.
She says for too long, some manufacturers have taken advantage of a loophole in the Consumer Guarantees Act.
We've all been talking about the loophole in the CGA, and it essentially means that manufacturers can opt out from providing spare parts for the products that they sell if they say, we don't offer spare parts. So they can get away with that by bearing that little limitation in the bottom of a warranty or a manual or something.
And the bill just closes that loophole?
Essentially, the bill would close that loophole.
But master electricians say they have serious concerns.
This proposal hit us out of left field, and I am concerned that not enough people are talking about it and not enough people understand potentially some of the unintended consequences.
So when you first saw this bill though, Alex, what was your immediate reaction?
Electrical safety. I don't know if you're aware, but we've been dealing with some electrically unsafe products at the moment. The Serene heater issue is one classic example of that.
I'll get her to explain that in full in a moment, but first, back to her bill concern.
Where you're dealing with products that are electrical in nature, that currently any repair or any fixing of those products comes under the prescribed electrical work. So you actually need to be a trained electrician to be able to fiddle or repair those goods. And so for me, the nervousness really kicked in when we're talking so broadly about goods and the ability for consumers to potentially repair those goods. And the bill goes even further, Amanda, in that it says that potentially manufacturers may need to provide instructions to consumers on how to repair the goods. And when you do that, the electrical safety regulations that are in place to keep people safe essentially are voided. So it gives consumers the potential to be able to repair electrical goods that really they don't have the competence to be able to do.
And that's the problem for master electricians. The bill is broad and covers goods like electronics and plumbing that might not be safe for your average person to repair.
And if you're thinking about things like microwaves, for example, they've got huge capacitors in them, and they don't even have to be plugged to discharge huge amounts of voltage. We're talking hundreds of volts. So that could kill someone if they felt that they would repair it.
That's what I was about to ask. Worst case scenario, what's your biggest fear?
My biggest fear is that we're bound to provide information on how to fix electrical appliances, and we have someone at home having a crack at it. And, you know, electricity and people who aren't trained to manage it is not a good mix.
And I guess it'll give lay people, the misplaced confidence to take on a repair that is well outside their competence.
100%. You summed it up beautifully, Amanda. 100%.
Right, back to Serene heaters. What's the story there and how does it relate to the bill?
The Consumer Affairs and Commerce Minister has issued a compulsory recall notice for thousands of faulty bathroom heaters. A WorkSafe investigation found the Serene S2068 heaters could overheat and have started house fires. The recall notice includes all heaters imported, sold or installed since June 2018. 35,000 heaters are known to be affected so far.
Serene heaters were a bathroom heater that came into effect, quite a lot of popularity 7 or 8 years ago, and they became sort of the go-to bathroom heater. They were brought in from overseas, and the first batch essentially passed testing. So they were deemed electrically safe, and off they went into, you know, every rest home and kaingoura home in the country, as well as hotels and all of that. Subsequently, one of those product ranges was found to actually be electrically unsafe through a number of house fires. and fires that have happened and are still happening. So, start of this year, we had another 3 house fires down south as a consequence of those heaters. Those heaters are actually prohibited from use. So they're not just a voluntary recall, it's actually illegal to use those heaters. And my nervousness is we've got heaters that are illegal to use. They're still in people's homes. We haven't done a very good job at recalling or enforcing the removal of those heaters. Imagine that issue across every good in New Zealand. So our enforcement capability to deal with just that one product is pretty weak right now. And we're introducing a bill into New Zealand that would potentially amplify that, particularly in goods that you may be bringing in from overseas, particularly if our testing regime isn't strong enough to pick up faulty products. And we're talking electrical products here. So, yeah, that's my nervousness. There's a bit of a background in terms of the risks we're dealing with right now, only to be amplified potentially under this bill.
And all this leads to another concern for Alex.
The question then becomes who's liable? If there's a house fire, who is liable? What would the insurance companies think about that? Who covers the cost? There are some really big questions that this bill poses, and actually we're dealing with right now through the Serene heater as a case in point.
Have you put these questions to the government or to the Green Party? Have there been any answers?
So at the moment, we are collating our submission. We've got a number of points that we'd like to raise. Last year, we pulled together a group called the Electrical Industry Advocacy Committee, and it was brought about through the Serene heater issue. So we had a number of wholesalers, suppliers, contractors, manufacturers operating in New Zealand that were all impacted by the Serene heater issue. So we felt coming together and actually getting a sort of a bit more of a unified approach and unified practices in the way they were going to deal with the recall was kind of critical, and we owed that to consumers. So that group is being consulted on right now with regard to this bill. We will pull together a submission on their behalf, and we'll certainly be raising those questions as part of our response to it.
I did put those concerns to Marama Davidson, who in a statement said the bill does not alter or undermine safety regulations that protect people from harm. Where it's unsafe, consumers should continue to use a professional repairer who will have greater ability to repair products and appliances thanks to the obligations on manufacturers to provide manual software information and parts. That professional repairer could be a master electrician. This is the Greens co-leader in the House promoting the bill last month.
This bill is quite a common sense one. It's a very common sense one. It is because this bill is at the heart of our communities wanting to fix our stuff and removing the barriers. We've got the story of a farmer whose 2 sons have actually trained as technical automotive and mechanical repairers, but because they cannot access the information, they cannot fix the machinery themselves. So farmers are held hostage by having to then call on manufacturer-approved technicians and wait. And often the machinery breakdown is at crucial times like harvesting, and then waiting for a technical expert, an approved expert, that can actually price gouge and exploit farmers and charge a price that is well above what is reasonable, where a local technical expert can get there faster and for a reasonable price. These are some of the examples of the stories of why this bill would make it better for all of us.
So what does the bill mean for the many Kiwis who love online and overseas shopping?
Massive offshore online department stores are disrupting Kiwi shopping habits. New Zealand Post e-commerce data shows we spent more than $6 billion online last year, a 5% bump on the year before. Overseas online transactions are growing at a faster rate than domestic, but the average offshore spend is falling. Translation? Kiwi shoppers are looking for bargains overseas.
Alex, I'm very late to the game on this, but I just bought for the first time something very cheap from Temu.
Temu has absolutely exploded onto the scene, advertising simply unbeatable prices.
This new website, Temu, I can't tell you how many people I've seen raving about the cheap tech you can get on this site.
If it breaks, can that be repaired? I mean, what is the threshold? What counts for that kind of stuff?
So really good questions. We're not sure. So as I sort of said earlier, the bill is just far too broad. We've got a whole lot of questions that we're still wanting to get guidance on, particularly for our manufacturers and suppliers, which covers those questions you've got. How long would parts realistically be need to held by a manufacturer, for example? What's the manufacturer's liability for a botched repair? So, for example, someone doesn't use a part that is specified and they use another part. Who would be liable if that product went up in the air or up in flames, so to speak? That would be a huge, huge area of legal liability questions.
And I guess who is liable if someone is seriously injured or killed?
100%. 100% great question. Is it the manufacturer? Is it the consumer who fiddled with the parts? Is it the repairer? We've sort of seen some of these questions and we're still dealing with some of these issues with regard to the Serene heater debacle.
In her statement, Marama Davidson said the liability for injury would remain unchanged. If this bill does pass, Alex, what challenges might consumers still face? Like, if they say, actually, I don't have the confidence to fix this myself, what are the chances of getting a skilled repairer or an electrician to come into their home and fix that?
Look, I mean, I think right now we have quite a critical workforce shortage. So we're about 6,000 electricians short of what we need to be able to service the current demand. And with electrification, that is only going to increase. So I think what we may see as unintended consequences of this particular bill is that we will see price increases for consumers because it's going to be harder to get an electrician because they're going to be really, really busy. But I also think the cost of repairing products, whilst you think it would be cheaper, housing those goods, providing them, for endless periods of time on tap is going to increase the bottom line for consumers, particularly because you're going to need to house them in warehouses for, whatever the duration is, and we're not clear on what that duration is. I think it would be a good thing to have consumers reach out to electricians to actually have the products fixed, because we don't want them doing them on their own. But if manufacturers are required to provide information on how to fix the products, we end up opening Pandora's box, because that work, as I sort of mentioned earlier, no longer sits as prescribed electrical work under the safety regulations we've got in place now, which I think is the bigger risk.
So you think, though, that products will become more expensive if the law passes?
I personally believe so, because of the lack of clarity that the bill or the draft bill currently has in terms of how long is a reasonable period of time for spare parts to be housed. Is it every single part or only certain parts? I think the overseas, the way that the EU sort of dealt with it at the moment is they've been quite measured in their approach. So they're talking about washing machines, TVs, smartphones. They are gradually bringing it into effect. This bill is so broad that it covers every good. And I think when you're talking about electrical goods, or you're talking about goods that are involved in, say, plumbing or gas, it starts to become a real safety concern for consumers.
The National Party and ACT are also concerned about an increase in prices for consumers. Here's ACT's Todd Stevenson in the House.
We need to think about the actual economic impact on manufacturers. So if we impose this right to repair, so it's not an offer to repair, it's not a maybe repair, it's a right, so a consumer can demand something is repaired, that is actually going to place additional costs on manufacturers, and we have to accept that. Those costs are likely, they're going to be passed on to the consumer. So I think we just need to think about that.
Marama Davidson says that's simply not true.
Let me also pick up price, because I will pull that one right apart. So around the world, we have several countries and places where repair legislation has been in place for a number of years. I mentioned the US, the EU, the UK, Canada, Australia, France, and that's several states across the US. After several years, there is absolutely zero evidence of price increase to consumer. So I had a responsibility to rip that argument right apart.
So if the law is passed here, how will it be enforced? Will manufacturers be penalised if they don't comply? I put that to Consumer New Zealand.
I'm not sure if there'll be penalties, but it's past its first reading and it's got to go through select committee, and I would expect that they're going to be having some really intense and robust conversation around, how this is actually going to look in New Zealand, because it is a big bill and it is going to make a change. But, it's one that we really need to prioritise, because if we keep going down this endless cycle of cut and chuck and consumers not being able to make informed choices about the product that they buy, then we're going to find ourselves in a position where maybe the only thing that we can buy is from Temu, and it's just completely unrepairable.
I asked master electricians if the bill can be repaired to make their industry happy and supportive.
At a principle level, I think it's fair to say that we think it's a great first step in terms of sustainability. I don't think anyone's questioning the lack of support. I think what we are cautiously navigating as a practical vocational industry are all the questions that are coming up, that are posed in terms of enforcement, which products, how long in terms of duration do we need to house them. So certainly more questions at the moment before we can make a call one way or the other.
Madam Speaker, I am so proud of being able to bring this bill to the House with its multiple benefits to people and planet and to just our everyday convenience, with its broad support from across diverse communities, with the opportunity right now to get it to Select Committee. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
What is your message to the Green Party? If you could sit down with Marama Davidson, what would you say?
I think at a principle level, we absolutely support the intent of the bill, but we really need a much longer, more in-depth consultation process, particularly with the wholesalers, suppliers and manufacturers in the electrical industry, but also in some of those other industries where there are products that are potentially unsafe if they don't have prescribed, experienced, competent professionals working on them. And also just be a bit more measured in the rollout. Let's start small. Let's make sure that we've got the systems and the infrastructure to be able to roll it out and enforce it, and over time look to increase it, pretty much like the EU is doing right now.
On the flip side, on a good side, do you think products will be made better now and sort of have a longer lifespan under this new law?
I think you're always going to have those suppliers and wholesalers potentially bringing product in internationally that will always want to be the cheapest. And it's about educating consumers that actually you may pay a little bit more and there are quality ticks attached to that. I don't think that this will solve that. This bill will solve that problem.
Now tell me, Alex, be honest, when was the last time you got something repaired?
It was a long time ago.
That's all for today. The Detail is a Newsroom production supported by RNZ and New Zealand On Air. Thank you to Abby Darman and Alex Vraniak-Wheeler. This episode was produced by Gwen McClure and engineered by Jeremy Ansell. I'm Amanda Gillies. Matua.